Ladies and gentlemen, a couple of weeks ago, I finished an over-the-board chess tournament and declared that I was retiring from over-the-board chess. Well, really, I was retiring from most competitive events, including Title Tuesday, and I stated my reasons in that video. And many of you have left very supportive comments. I've enjoyed reading through them, and actually, even some very strong grandmasters have reached out to me personally to kind of just commend me on being so open about some of the struggles that a competitive chess player can go through, and so on and so forth. What I did not expect after retiring from all things competitive is for what you're about to see in this video. And the only way I can really draw any sort of attention to that is I'm going to show you 5 games that I've played in my online adventures and just regular 3-minute blitz. But before I do that, I want to show you this. Since coming back from my tournament, I was 2650. I am now 2818 or 2811 or 2818, 2811, I guess is my current rating. I have gained 160 points, almost 170 points. I am winning games at a 61% rate in that time period. That is crazy. I don't understand the reason. You could argue it's because I'm more relaxed. It's because I'm thinking about things a little bit less. You could argue it's just a good run and I'm going to go down to 2650. But whatever the reason might be, in today's video, I wanted to take you through 5 games. I feel a lot more relaxed. I feel like I'm just playing moves and good things are happening. And I just kind of wanted to share this video with you to show you some really fun games, some good chess and some good vibes. And yeah, this entire streak of mine began against this individual, this FM from Australia. And my rating then was not 2811. It's just when you load the games in, you get your most recent rating. This game began with, well, I played a very interesting opening. I was trying to play an Orthoschnapp Gambit. My opponent took my Orthoschnapp Gambit and played whatever the heck that is. I don't know if it's a mouse slip. Maybe they intended to play b6 instead, but they played b5, and then I decided, you know, I respected it. I thought it was a mouse slip, so let's give them the pawn back. They took it back in a rather exotic way. Okay, opening doesn't really make a whole lot of difference. It's 3-minute blitz. It's kind of meaningless. I developed my bishop to c4. Good move because I cannot really get hit with these 2 pawns. Now I play d3, trying to develop my other bishop, but I obviously move my knight. He plays d5. And then here I played this move queen b3 with the intention of not losing my bishop, of course, while hitting the queen and getting the queens off the board and getting my bishop to safety. Remember, I was still about 2660 back then, all right? So my rating was quite low. My confidence wasn't super high. And we got a relatively boring position out of the opening. It looked something like this. Now, it's just an equal position. I mean, we have no queens. We've traded just like a pawn or 2 otherwise. Yeah, I mean, now, you know, it's just really about who's going to have the more active pieces and whose pieces are going to coordinate against what. You can argue white is better because black has 2 pawns in the center of the board, and so I will create a target against one of them. I'll either put my rook on c1 or d1, and then I'm just going to have something to play for. He doesn't really have any way to attack my pawns, so c4 is what my opponent chooses. I go back. And now the d5 pawn will likely become a long-term target. I play the move a3 so his bishop can't move. It's a bit of a slow move. It's nothing special. And yeah, now we can kind of already begin to see the makings of various attacks on the d5 pawn. Again, when your pawns are sort of standing in the center like that, if I can get to them first, I'm going to be attacking them very quickly. So knight b6. I bring my dark squared bishop back to attack the knight, and he plays rook b8. So now if I take on here and then here, I'm going to lose the pawn on b2. First, though, he should take this, and then he should take this. So it's actually a good move. It tactically defends the pawn over here. Now, here I play an important move. We're about to go to battle, right? So right before we go to battle, I want to make sure everything that's weak is defended and I'm improving my position. And for that reason, I play this move f4. This is a very, very, very important and very useful pawn move because now my center outpost is very strong. I continue to have the same amount of pressure. And maybe I can even double my rooks on the d file. Like maybe I have an idea to go rook d2, rook d1, or rook f2, rook d2. And that also in turn could potentially defend my pawn on b2. That is my weakest link. He plays the move g6, and I play bishop d4, just an overall improving move. It's kind of a feel-good move. And then suddenly here I'm like, wait a minute. not only do I have a strong central bastion, he doesn't really have any moves. I've sort of negated his play. I've locked the center. The queen side is just like, he can't do anything, right? It's an impregnable queen side because a4 is completely covered. So what if I just go for an attack and then it hit me? Why don't I just play f5? Suddenly, my f-pawn, same side attacking chess, is bolstered by multiple pieces here. I got the bishops, I got the rook, right? We're in good shape here. We're trying to push through. He takes on f5, I take with the rook. I just looking like I'm in the driver's seat. Rook h5, rook f1, rook f7, I mean rook h7. Like, how does he stop my attack? Really, I don't see a way. It's actually one of my biggest weaknesses as a player. He plays bishop d7, rook h5. I blundered a fork. Yeah. I actually, no joke, forgot that he can fork me. Suddenly I'm like, oh my God, I'm gonna lose, what an idiot. And then I'm like, wait a minute. Wait, what if I take here? And then when he takes my rook, I don't take back with my knight. What if I threaten mate? Rook h8 is mate, and even though he is temporarily up 4 points of material, there is nothing he can do about it. Now, if he takes my pawn, it looks like he gets out. But here there is an absolutely savage move. I again ignore his hanging bishop, and I mummify his king with bishop to g6. Savage. Absolutely savage move. His king is stuck. The king is stuck here in the corner with my rook and two bishops. He plays this. I take. He gives me a check. I move, and he tries to run. But one final move, bishop f6, and the rook and the bishops do the job. They seal the escape, and my opponent can no longer get out. And I remember when I won this game, it just felt good to win a game like this. It was a savage way to win a game. Like, you don't even have to deliver mate. You just have to threaten it, and he resigns. It's crazy because I actually hung bishop g4, but as it turns out, bishop g4 is a terrible move. Bishop e6 here was the best move. Just giving up this pawn, I guess, and trying to defend with his knight, like bringing his knight back. I mean, and preventing e6. So I actually set a genius blunder trap. Well, that's what we'll call it. Now, this next game, this was my highest accuracy game in the last like 50 games I played. This one also had 2 brilliant moves. I was super proud of this game. So this game began, you know, I just played like a random opening. I play a lot of random things in Blitz because I like to experiment with different positions. It was like a reverse London, but I sort of played a Catalan setup with this bishop on g2, queen b3, queen b6, and I played the move c5, inviting an exchange of queens. He played the move a6, b4, rook c8. So white is always better here because I have more space. This pawn on b7 is very bad. I can always go knight d2, knight b3, knight a5. I'm gonna put my bishop on f4, and that patrols those squares. I just have to be a little bit careful because there is knight h5, and there is also h6 and g5. And he did play h6, so I played h4. And then he sort of took his eye off my pawn, my bishop, and then here comes that maneuver. I told you about knight d2, knight b3, and then knight a5. I galloped over to a5. I should have been a bit more accurate here. I should have taken and then probably played knight a5 because that actually freezes his rook. Or, as Stockfish showed, I have b5, which is very nice. And if he takes, I have rook a8, which is quite brutal. And if he takes with the c-pawn, I have knight b5 with the same idea. But I played knight a5, we got this position, and I mean, I just thought that I had a very comfortable position. Like, he has no play, my knight on a5 is very nice. And one thing about when you have a massive space advantage and a lot of pawns, you have a massive space advantage against a bunch of pawns, sacrifices are always there. You're always looking at ways to sack, win a couple pawns, if not all three, and then just advance with your pawns. Because 2 pawns together are really brutal to stop. So you're going to notice throughout this game, I'm kind of like slowly improving my position, and there's stuff brewing. Look at what he did. He walked his king over to a castled position. What he didn't realize is that I've got stuff brewing there. And the second he played a lazy move, brilliant move number 1, kaboom. The whole time over here, by the way, I've shut down his play. He can't go here. I played f3, so he can't bring in his knight. So he has no play. Kaboom. Detonation. Now the king has to come out. I win a second pawn, and I win the exchange. So now I'm up a point of material, but it's much worse than that, because now here comes the avalanche of pawns. Not just one B pawn, I have another B pawn. I have a second B pawn in reserve when that pawn gets traded. So he plays king b7. I have a few ways to win here. I kind of didn't want to like leave it just to the A file. So what I did after king b7 is I just slowly improve my position, rook a5 and rook a1, and you just see how quickly the position plays itself once the pawns fall, right? So I'm threatening rook a7. He goes here. I take rook a7, and this set a very nasty idea up. So I wanted to make sure his king was suffocating, right? His king has no legal moves. Totally isolated king. But how do I get to the king? Well, first I threaten this mate, right? And when he stops that mate, I threaten another mate. What am I talking about? Well, I threaten this mate. I threaten that when he makes a move, rook b6, and he takes and he gets mated with the pawns. Both pawns have a defense. The back row is completely covered by my rook. I mean, this is probably one of the more savage mates I've delivered, and I was very happy when the cap score said I played this game at around 96%. You can't really complain, right? Well, we know those parents, we know those parents. 96, where did the other 4% go? Shut up, you should have taken the test. Just kidding, don't disrespect your parents. Sometimes they deserve it, but you know what? They're your parents at the end of the day. As my grandmother used to say, you don't get to pick your parents or your siblings. Or your favorite chess YouTubers. We all know it's me. Now, next two games I have for you. Very fun games from the other side. I wanted to show you games that I won with white and black. This was a game I played against Strong NM. I don't know who this is. I don't know. Maybe they'll even watch this video and be like, oh, I'm in a Gotham video. Like generally, if it's an American and it's an NM, it's probably like some teenager. It's like between the age of like 11 and 15. They're probably their alt account. They're probably like 2,400 over the board. This opening was very funny. So it started with an e6, b6. I have a course on this, by the way, GothamChess.com. My opponent played bishop g5, and rather than pinning myself, I decided here to play the move f6. This is a very confrontational move. The point of this move is to still get to play f5. I just didn't want to, pin myself. I didn't want to play knight f6. Is f6 the best move? No, absolutely not. But I wanted this position. This is the position that I wanted. So e6, b6 against d4, c4 setups, black tries to capture the e4 square, and that's exactly what I've done. Many times by trading off that bishop for that knight, and then planting the knight on e4, and very simple play afterward. The pawn on f5 is very nice. It does a very good job controlling the square, and also that pawn on f5 after I castle will allow me to rook lift, okay? It'll allow me to bring my rook out. It's much better than having the pawn on f7, very passive. So from this position, you'll just see how easily the game plays itself. So my opponent plays b4, taking some space. I castle. He plays e3, looking to develop the light-squared bishop. I bring my knight to the middle. The bishop moves out of danger. And now I play the move d6. The point of d6 is that I have another knight galloping in. That's really what that is. Also prepares against various things like d5, because it allows me to clog the center and not allow this bishop to have such a prominent role in the game. Opponent plays bishop d3, knight d7, and castles. Now, I mentioned a while ago, this position can oftentimes just play itself because of this advanced f-pawn. And in here I can play, g5, g4 is one of the most aggressive ways to play. It's not very good, especially if white can strike back and then, immediately start poking holes in your attack. But I decided here to play the move rook f6. Rook f6, my opponent can play d5 and attack here. I didn't think that was anything special because first of all, I can just move my rook, and second of all, I can just block, right? And I thought that was pretty reasonable. So my opponent played knight e1 right away. The point of knight e1 is to play f3. My opponent is trying to get my knight out of the middle, to kick it out, then to continue forward with his attack. The problem is I win the race. Rook h6, if he now dares to play the move f3, I'm bringing my queen, and this is exactly what I told you. This is why I love e6, b6, because many times the position plays itself, and my opponent still plays f3. I was like, what? What about this? I'm threatening a mate. Queen h2 is mate in 1. Now, you can take my knight. Okay, you can take my knight, but then your king is going to get hunted out. Now, at this point, it's too late to go back. If you play h3, I'm going to go back with my knight. I'm still going to sacrifice on h3, and I'm still going to open up your king. So you can play moves like queen e2. Maybe I won't even sack. Maybe I'll go here, setting up just the free winning of a pawn. And then if you do this, it's just boom, boom, boom. Oh my goodness. Imagine just getting ladder mated like this. Queen h2, rook h2. That's crazy. I just did it with 2 pieces, right? So what does my opponent do? He calls my bluff. He takes my knight. I check here. And now find the best move for black. You would think when you're in the middle of an attack like this, you're like, oh, I gotta check. It's gotta be a check. Like, how can it not be a check? No, it doesn't have to be a check at all. Sometimes the best move is just getting back a little bit more material and creating practical difficulty. So I took the pawn. I now have 2 pawns for the piece, and I opened the f-file. And one other thing that I did, when I did this and I opened up the f-file, I took away 2 squares. So now my opponent cannot shield himself with the knight anymore. And when the bishop moves, the monster continues to attack. I bring my rook. I got to give everybody a turn, right? The king runs. Now this can be taken, and the king is responsible for defending 2 different things. So I bring my queen all the way back to h5, and there's no way to protect the king. If you go king d2, I take, and you lose this. If you play knight f3, as my opponent did in the game, trying to give back a little bit of material, I grab that, and it's anything but over. Bishop takes f3. I don't win the queen, but I win everything else. Because he would have played rook f3, queen f3, he would have had to defend his queen, I would have gone here, he would have gone here. Actually, I do win the queen. Because of this, then mate, and queen d2. Wow. It took 21 moves, but this game was an absolute demolition. And this is honestly the way I've been feeling in some of these games recently. I'm just melting my opponents. The next game was part of a 4-game match I played against a very strong Canadian IM. This guy is one of the highest rated IMs in the world, I think. Like, I'm actually going to look him up. I think he's like 2,500 FIDE. Like, maybe he's lost some rating, but this dude is super strong. He's 2482. He's 2482, and, you know, he was like 2510. Okay, I don't know how many GM norms he has, but he's very, very strong. And he beat me a couple of games in this match. This was by far my favorite game of the match. It was a kind of this time I played my modern course. I played my G6 course, and it was a kind of a very imbalanced, complicated opening where I pushed my king side pawns trying to trap his bishop, and then I took a lot of space here with e5 as well. He played very passively and allowed me to get this kind of very interesting bind with f4. So I'm very overextended. I've really sacrificed my development, but I'm sort of restricting his pieces a lot. So knight f6, bishop b5. This is his way of trying to fight back here. And I noticed that I have this move e4, kind of relinquishing my support of my pawn, but now forcing his knight to undevelop. The problem is when you overextend, when you're like way past the center line, you haven't castled, you don't have a lot of development out, your position runs the risk of getting very weak. So I had to take, and then here I had to come up with a plan. So my first order of business, what is this bishop doing, right? Are you going to take me or not? Okay, he's not going to take me. All right, fine, then I'm going to castle. And then maybe I'm going to kick the bishop out with b5. So knight e2, right? Knight e7. Now you can no longer take, and I'm going to rotate my knight this way. He can't really castle, I thought, because knight f5, knight e3. Nobody can actually defend that pawn. So he played the move g4. g4 indicates to me he is not castling kingside ever. Okay, so I brought my knight to the middle, and he played bishop g1, which is one of the ugliest and strangest bishop moves I've ever seen in my life. Like, why is the bishop there? But his position is defending itself. It's not that simple, you know? And I want to play b5, I want to play c5, so I kick him out, and I finish my development. Now, believe it or not, the evaluation of this position is equal. As space advantageous as this looks for black, white is not worse, apparently. I mean, white has several approaches here to just equalizing and actually maybe even trying to play for an advantage. Most of it has to do with my pawn on e4. So my opponent plays the move, queen c2, attacking my pawn, and suddenly I'm like, wait a minute, this is so stupid. Like, am I actually just gonna lose this pawn and then lose the game? I'm getting really mad. Like, really? So I decide c5. So if he takes on e4, I trap his bishop, right? So second time in this game, I'm using flank pawns to potentially trap a bishop. Notice early on in the game, I played the move f4. I forced one bishop all the way back, and now I'm about to force a second bishop all the way back. So he trades the bishop, but that gives me good center defense, and this is around the time I'm like, wait a minute, I don't think that was a very good decision. He long castles, all right? Now, this looks like a free pawn. I thought it wasn't, but it is. Apparently, I can just go in with my queen. I decided to go in with my queen first, And now really the idea here for me is, can I wreck his queenside, right? He's indicated to me where he's castled. What is the way to wreck his queenside? Pawns in front of his king, right? They're hooks. So now b4. b4 strikes both. He plays knight b3 attacking my queen. I don't want to simplify just yet, so I slide my queen over and I prevent the move c4. He takes on c5. I'm thinking here, I'm like, if I take back, if I take this, which of these three captures gives me the best attacking chances? Certainly not this one. That just keeps my tension. ba. That gives me the best attacking chances because I can take with check and I can also try to make a queen. So he goes here attacking my queen, danger levels. I take the pawn with check. He goes here and I hang out. Now, queen a4 wasn't the most accurate move, but I thought it was good to bait his rook here because I thought I could bring my queen back toward the middle, and that's exactly what I did. And his position is kind of barely hanging on. Like, look at everybody responsible for defending that knight on b3. He has 4 pieces defending that and 8 points of material not playing. And in every good position like this, there is one domino that will fall, and then the whole position will collapse. And I played this move, knight back to d7. That move threatens to infiltrate with yet another piece to the d3 or b3 or a4 squares, but it does something else. Knight d7 is the best move because it activates 3 pieces at once. Knight d7 is actually a glorious move. This move threatens to take the knight, removing a guard, activating my rook, and bringing in 3 points more of material. This move single-handedly brought in 11 points of material. And that is the domino that will tip the scale. He plays king c1. I'm like, not so fast. He runs this way. I'm like, not so fast. I'm taking one of your knights now. He's got to move the knight. Right, knight? But look at this. Now I go to the back rank. Have you ever seen something like this? 2 rooks running wild together on an enemy's first rank in the middle of a game. Now, believe it or not, that wasn't the best move. Actually, rook b2 is the best move. I didn't see rook b2. The point is that I'm threatening checkmate if he takes queen d3. But keep queen d3 in mind because it happens a couple moves later. I play queen d3 and he resigns because checkmate is coming with queen b1. Yeah, this is one of the more savage positions I think I've ever had in my life. Like, again, this whole video is just me playing really fun chess. And that brings me to the final game of the day. I haven't actually had a chance to play as so many grandmasters in this run. I've beaten a few. I've lost to a few as well. This is against the grandmaster from Serbia. I don't know who this is. There's a handful of grandmasters from Serbia. And this was a Trempowski, one of my favorite openings. D4 Dynamite. Literally playing all my courses. So just masterclass in how to play my courses. And I play this setup of a stonewall. Like, the stonewall opening for white is this pawn structure. But the problem is the dark squared bishop, which I've now completely removed. And also my opponent doesn't get the e4 square. So the reason I like to play this kind of stonewall structure is I have good control over these 2 squares. And if I have good control over those squares, I'm able to create an attack much faster with moves like knight e5. Now, he tries to trade my bishop. He tries, and then he tries to trade my queen a few moves later. But you'll notice I'm starting an attack. So first, I slid my king to h1 out of this diagonal and to potentially bring a rook to the g file. He tries to trade my queen and my knight here. So he tries to play knight d7 first, and then he plays bishop d6, but here comes my attack. Notice how easily this position is playing itself. My king hides in the corner. The rook is going to the g file. My knights are covering all these important squares. He takes my knight, and now I get connect 4. So with this move, I restrict his movement. I get connect 4, and I open up the f file as well. So that's just kind of a circulation killer of a move. He plays h5. Now, I play knight h4. The idea of knight h4 is to play queen e2 or g6. So, for example, if he plays g6 right now, I'm going to take. He's going to get obliterated. So the idea of this is to prevent g6 and also try to prepare my own attacking ideas. So now he tries to trade queens. You have such a big attack, you don't want to trade the queens. That is a horrible decision. So I attack his pawn, and I force him to move that pawn. Now I attack that pawn, right? I'm looking to sacrifice. So he has to defend with his king. I really don't like where his queen is, so I ask it what are its intentions, right? So now if the queen goes here, it gets trapped, which is very unfortunate. So he has to go back. Now, this position is +2 for white if I just very slowly build up my attack, okay? But I'm not really a slow guy, like mentally maybe a little bit. But, you know, I want things to happen now. And I want to make brilliancies and I want to make YouTube videos. So what do? Rook f6. You got to play it. It's not the best move. It's such an aesthetic move. Because now you're threatening sacrifices. And when he takes, you get connect 5. I mean, come on. Who doesn't love a connect 5 pawn chain just brutalizing the black position, right? King h7. Position here is equal. I play rook g1, threatening to sacrifice on g6. He plays rook g8. Now, I play rook g5, threatening mate in 1. Rook h5 is mate. He has to defend like this. And this position is equal, okay? Like, my attacking chances are actually outweighed by Stockfish's ability to defend itself. But, actually, now that Stockfish is thinking, it thinks that after knight f3, there's actually quite a good way. There's some good ways that white can create some attack on black, which is interesting. Oh, now it thinks that white is completely winning. Oh, it just turns out I'm a genius. Rook f6 is definitely the best move then. Wow. They should give me credit for this brilliant move, rook f6 in that case. Yeah, I mean, anytime you have a king like this and 2 pawns that can anchor in a rook sacrifice for like a bishop or a knight, it's almost always going to be good if the king is left alone. And in this game, the king was left alone. I made an inaccuracy, though. Before bringing my knight back, I played queen d2. It was better for me to play knight f3 first and then commit my queen later. I decided to do this, setting a trap that if he takes my rook, he gets brutally checkmated on the edge of the board with queen g3. He could do this, but then he probably gets mated all the same. I mean, just look at this. Like, what are you doing here? Go home. You're drunk. So queen d2, he took my pawn, and I played knight f3 now. And here I thought I was just totally winning. I thought I was going to play e4, and there's a very kind of interesting idea after e4, which is double check. He has to take and then checkmate. Now, in the game, he made a mistake. He did have a way of defending himself here, which is why knight f3 was better than playing queen d2 right away. But he played check, and now I just go back. I block with my rook, I kick out his queen, and suddenly, here comes the devastating attack on the king. e4 check, king back to h7, knight g5 check, king back to h8, knight f7 check, and the connect 5 reigned supreme, and the attack proved to be devastating and fatal for the black pieces. Folks, of course I've lost games as well, all right? I've lost games, like, I played a game against Soupy, strong Brazilian grandmaster. He just destroyed me. It, like, wasn't close. I'm still experiencing nerves. I still get very nervous in interesting and complicated positions against 2,900 rated players. But it seems like I'm a bit more relaxed. And it seems like even though the over-the-board chess dream is currently over, we'll see if it ever resumes in the future, my chess has been actually pretty good. So, hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one. Get out of here.